So we're on my book, page 36. That's probably in the 40s in most of your books. Kamala, you're my reference. What page are we on? It's the paragraph that starts. I don't. It's only a one sentence paragraph. I don't know whether there is anything on the sub.
44. 44.
44.
Yeah,
Okay,
almost
40.
to the top of the book. Just few lines below the.
Excellent. All right. So I'm just going to go one paragraph before to frame that question. So if you remember, he was there talking with these two gentlemen about his miracle that happened with the charcoal in the Philokalia. And one of them was kind of like, yeah, whatever, and never kind of bought into it. And he's gone off to bed. And the other guy, the schoolmaster, is actually interested in the story. And so he has just started telling him about the Philokalia, who the schoolmaster has never heard about, but is curious. And he asks this question. He says, "But what is one to do to find it for oneself, to feel it in one's heart, to acknowledge it by one's will, to take it and feel the happiness and light of it, and so to reach salvation?" Oh, I guess he's asking that question. So what was before that? Oh, the man was talking. Okay, I have them backwards. The schoolmaster is talking about the New Testament and talking about this idea of interior prayer. And he says there's no need to learn it. It's innate in every one of us. An interesting statement. It's already there, nothing you have to do. And so our pilgrim asks, but what is one to do to find it in oneself, to feel it in one's heart, to acknowledge it by one's will, to take it and feel the happiness and light of it, and so to reach salvation? I asked. And he responds, I don't know whether there is anything on the subject in the theological books, said he. Well, here it is. It is all explained here, I answered, showing him my book again. The schoolmaster noted the title and said he would certainly have one sent from Tobolsk and study it. After that, we went our different ways. I thanked God for his talk with the schoolmaster and prayed that God would so order things that the clerk also might read the Philokalia, even if only once, and let him find salvation through it. Another time, it was in the spring, I passed through a village where I stayed with the priest. I was reading through that. I didn't say anything, but it passed in my head how sweet it was that he prayed not just for the schoolmaster, but also for the schoolmaster's friend who had kind of ridiculed his faith and gone off to bed, kind of dismissing both of their interest in the spiritual ideals. And so it's sweet to see, this, that he just would think of that he wouldn't just go on about his business, but he had time to think about somebody who, you know, didn't respect him, maybe. Another time, it was in the spring, I passed through a village where I stayed with the priest. He was a worthy man, living alone, and I spent 3 days with him. Having watched me for that length of time, he said to me, Stay here. I will pay you something. I need a trustworthy man. As you see, we are starting to build a stone church. Yeah, we've read this, but anyway. I have been looking for some honest person to keep an eye on the workmen and to stay in the chapel in charge of the offerings for that building fund. It is exactly the thing for you, and would just suit your way of life. You will be alone in the chapel and say your prayers. There is a quiet little room for a verger there. Please stay, at any rate until the building is finished. For a long time I refused, but in the end I had to yield to the good priest's begging, and I stayed there till the autumn, taking up my abode in the chapel. At first I found it quiet and apt for prayer, although a great many people came to the chapel, especially on holidays, some to say their prayers, and some because they were bored, and others again with the idea of pilfering from the collection plate. I read my Bible and my Philokalia every evening, and some of them saw this and started talking to me about it and asked me to read aloud. After a while, I noticed that a young village girl often came to the chapel and spent a long while in prayer. Listening to her whisperings, I found that the prayers she was saying Were some of them strange to me, and others the usual prayers in the garbled form? I asked her where she learned such things, and she told me it was from her mother, who was a churchwoman, but that her father belonged to a sect which had no priesthood. Feeling sorry for her, I advised her to read the prayers in the right form, as given by the tradition of the Holy Church. Then I taught her the right wording of the Lord's Prayer and of the Hail Mary, and finally I advised her to say the prayer of Jesus as often as she could, for that brought one nearer to God than any other prayer. The girl took note of what I said and set about it quite simply. And what happened? A short time afterwards, she told me that she was so used to the prayer that she felt it draw her all the time, that she used it as much as she could, that she enjoyed the prayer at the time, and that afterward she was filled with gladness and a wish to begin using it again. I was glad of this and advised her to go on with it more and more. So that's where we stopped the last time. So this young woman, feeling that bliss that comes from saying your mantra, from thinking of the presence with sincerity and with earnestness, that it doesn't take long, a week or two maybe, and certainly, if you are sincere and steady, and practicing it every day, within just a couple of weeks, that you will find a change within you. So one of the swamis, told a young man to go and say his mantra. He told him to say it for 2 years, and if he didn't find bliss in that 2 years, to come back and he could slap him. So summer was drawing to a close. Many visitors to the chapel came to see me also, not only to read and to ask for advice, but with all sorts of worldly troubles, and even to ask about things they had mislaid or lost. Some of them seemed to take me for a wizard. The girl I spoke about also came to me one day in a state of great distress and worry, not knowing what to do. This is a funny thing, because I'm not even a priest, but when I became a swami, this kind of thing also started happening. People coming and asking asking me for my blessing on their child, or coming and asking me to bless their new car, or all these things. I was like, it was so counterculture to me. I'd never heard of anything like that, much less you know take such a position myself that would have any effect. You just kind of had to play along on these things. But it's a beautiful thing from the other perspective, the faith that people have, in the divine, so that they want those things done, and they feel like something can come of it, something beautiful can happen in it. And so I never really came to a judgment about it. I just decided to step out of the way and just go on, just turn to mother and say, I don't know. If you're going to do something, Mom, that'd be great to do it. Her father wanted to make her marry a man of his own religion, and they were to be married not by a priest, but by a mere peasant belonging to that same sect. How could that be lawful marriage? Wouldn't it be the same thing as fornication? Cried the girl. She had made up her mind to run away somewhere or other. So he's one of these. There's only three in Christianity. There's only three forms of Christianity remaining that are called churches of the succession, because whenever a priest is ordained, the senior priests, lay their hands on them and pass on the blessing. And you can follow that laying on of hands all the way back to St. Peter, having Jesus lay his hands on him and bless him. And so there's the succession, this connection to Jesus that exists, I guess, in the Lutheran Church, the Episcopalian Church, and the Catholic Church, in Western Christianity anyway. Eastern Christianity, I imagine I don't know anything about that tradition though, in that regard. I learned all this up at Holy Cross. And so one of the big deals is when the Church of England split from the Catholic Church. They had nobody to continue that lineage. And so actually, I think it was an Irish priest, or at least some priest from the Isles, who crossed the line and came over and blessed a priest of the Anglican Church, of the Episcopalian Church, so that they would have the lineage within them as well. And so they also are a church of the, I can't remember what the word is, succession, something about, apostolic succession, where it blessed and follows its thing all the way back. And they place a great deal of faith in that, so that these churches, these evangelicals and Protestant churches that don't have priests or teachers that have been ordained, these churches of the apostolic succession can't believe that. They just can't. How could you do that? That person hasn't received the blessing, hasn't received the ordination, and also they're not part of that hierarchy at all. They're completely outside of it. And so the church has always maintained that it had that authority solely within itself. And so it seems like a great blasphemy to a Catholic, and certainly to this young woman and this pilgrim here, that her father belongs to one of these sects of Christianity that doesn't have this lineage. And so, in the eyes of the Catholic Church, for someone to get married without a priest officiating over the ceremony, that marriage isn't happening. That marriage isn't happening in heaven, as it were, you know, I guess in heaven, I don't know. It doesn't have that same authority. So it's a very big deal for them, and this is a very strong point for her. She's afraid that she's going to enter into a marriage without really being married, and be in a situation where she's committing fornication, which is, having sex outside of marriage. And so it's quite traumatic for her, I imagine. So she's going to run away to avoid it. So she's a very sweet person, a very sweet disposition for her, that she would rather run away and disappear like that. And hello, Kieran, good to see you. And that she would rather do that than to do something that wasn't true to her faith. But, said I, where to? They would be sure to find you again. They will look everywhere, and you won't be able to hide anywhere from them. You had better pray earnestly to God to turn your father from his purpose, and to guard your soul from this sin and heresy. That is a much sounder plan than running away. Indeed. Wow. I used to have back when I was in seminary at Abilene Christian back in about 1983, we had a gospel teacher. His name was Dr. Beers. And he must have been in his 90s. And why am I going on with that story? Where was I going with that? I got all wrapped up in my memories of Dr. Beers and is 92 years old. Oh, he was saying, whenever he would read a good verse in the Bible or something, he would always look up at us and he says, "Oh, that'll preach." Meaning I could write a great lecture over that verse. And I was just reading this, and when I heard him say here that it's a much better plan to turn to God than to run away, I heard his voice, talk about some scars, man, coming all the way up from 1983. In my mind, I actually heard his voice say, "That'll preach." That's a great topic. And it really is. So the reason that came to mind is because I felt it inside. I was like, wow, because all of the world's temptations, I'm reverting to my Christian vocabulary, but all of the world's temptations, all of the vices of the world are only distraction from the discomfort that we feel by having chosen them. They're distractions from the pain that we feel inside when our true nature feels that I don't know, call it a violation of itself, when you act against your nature, when you're selfish or untruthful or any of those things, it's against your own nature, and so you feel that tinge in there. And if you don't deal with it, if you don't go to the divine with it, how different would the story of the Garden of Eden have been if Adam and Eve, instead of running and hiding when they heard God walking in the cool of the day, if instead they had run to him and said, "Oh my gosh, we've done something terrible. we broke the one and only rule you gave us. And if they had gone and just really, tried to rectify and to come back to their nature, come back to the truth, uh, they wouldn't have had to suffer the pain of the curse or the pain of the results of their actions like that. And so it's beautiful that he's showing you the way here to return, to get back to our Eden within the heart, our paradise, to come back to that relationship where we feel comfortable inside. I just got a warning on my computer that said my internet connection is unstable. So if anything is not working, that might be why. But I'm going to keep
Good now.
going. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So that when you have a difficult time, or when you've made some wrong choices and you've got that tinge of discomfort, and you feel like you can't really go to the shrine because, like, oh God, well, I did that on purpose. Even I just, how can I face God, and how can I do this? And there's all that feeling inside, and you kind of avoid your practice for a day or two, or you do a shorter time, or you just feel insincere. There's all kinds of feelings that come up in that time. And this is a really good thing to remember, that the way to take care of that is to really dive in even more so to your prayer. That's how we grow in our knowledge and understanding of grace. Give Mother the opportunity to give you some bliss when you know you don't deserve it. Give Mother an opportunity to touch your heart when you know it's not right. Your heart isn't in the right place. Put yourself in the presence of the divine, no matter what condition you are, and learn of grace. Learn of the divine love. Learn of a love that's unconditioned, and put your faith in that. Hold on to that. Don't make your relationship with the divine contingent upon how you are acting or how you're doing. That's always changing. The mind is always up and down, And so don't make that your measure of your relationship with the divine. Measure your relationship with the divine by the love of God, which is not changing and doesn't shake and doesn't go up and down, doesn't move, is always present and always deeply rich and beautiful and full. Thus time passed away, and all this noise and fuss began to be more than I could bear. And at last, at the end of the summer, I made up my mind to leave the chapel and to go on my pilgrimage as before. I told the priest what was in my mind, saying, "You know my plans, Father. I must have quiet for prayer, and here it is very disturbing and bad for me, and I have spent the whole summer here. Now let me go and give your blessing on my lonely journey." That's beautiful, to want your life to be in support of your spiritual practice, so that when we make choices about our life, I remember when I sold my car back in 1987. I got rid of my car for the last time. And from then on, I had to make plans to support my life with no car. So, like, whenever I went and looked for a new apartment or moved, I would always pull out the bus map, and then I'd say, okay, my job is here. Is there a single bus line going to this apartment? And is there a single bus line going to the grocery store? And is there a single bus line to the doctors? And I checked all of that and started arranging my life around the fact that I no longer owned a car. All right, that's a pitiful example of what we're talking about. It seems almost, well, it is trivial, but he's doing the same thing to support his spiritual life. He's picking a place to live that's quiet. He's picking a circumstance and a job that's quiet, a place, a responsibility that's calm, that's calming, that's not pulling him out of his spiritual practice, that's not pulling him out of his inner peace. And so it's a good example for us. When we arrange our life, we so often just arrange it for comfort and beauty. The house, oh, we like the house. Oh, it's a great big bedroom. And like, oh, look, it overlooks the park and it's, there's nobody for miles and it's great. But, when we pick a house, say, oh, is it in a quiet place? Is it in a place that will help the mind to go inward? And when we pick a new job, when we pick where we live when we're in college, take up this notion that your life benefit your spiritual practice, benefit your attempt to purify your mind, benefit your attempt to touch this divinity inside, the silence that passes all understanding, within you, to try and to pick a life that supports that. Pick a schedule that supports that. Pick activities, extracurricular activities that support that. Instead of going out clubbing, hang out with people that have chosen a more quiet life. Go for a nice walk in the dark with the divine, or go to the beach and contemplate, or go camping and off into the wilderness, or, pick things in your life, pick a lifestyle and a way of living where you don't just have spiritual practice that you sort of mix in like you're making pancakes, but that your spiritual practice actually becomes the bowl that you mix it all together in. Your life supports your effort, because that's what it looks like. Ramakrishna, at the end of his day, every day you read in the gospel, it's a hard bit for me to read because I can't imagine the intense love he had for the divine and for his practice. Sometimes if I miss my practice, sometimes I don't feel anything about it. I'm just like, oops, I gotta do some more later, or gotta, do that tomorrow. Thakur, every day at the end of the day, he would lament, another day has passed, and I have not seen you, mother. And he would weep, and he would recount everything he did during the day to see, did I spend my day in the right way? Did I take full advantage of this day? That's the level of the devotion of our ideal of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother. And so we should arrange our day like that at the end of our day. And, I'm saying this knowing that I don't often do this. Arrange it so at the end of the day, you think about it. If I say, like Thakur says, that the meaning of life is God realization, if someone I didn't know looked at my day today, would they say, hey, the central point of that guy's life is God realization? Because they'd look at my activities and say, wow, look, it obviously points at his practice, at his love of God. It's a tall order from where I stand anyway. Maybe some of you are doing that, but it's important that we arrange our life, and that our life itself says that the most important thing to us is this divine relationship, this realization of our nature, this dwelling in the presence of the beloved. you know so watch our life and judge it, not judge it, but measure it by that standard. And just like him, if it's not, see what you can do to change it the next day. Don't feel guilty about it. Don't attach it to yourself and start to define yourself as a lousy practitioner. Not the point at all. Just pick up these things and work toward them. Be conscious as you work toward them in your life. Keep the ideal. Yes.
I'm going back to, I'm noticing just a trend, and I just kind of have just, okay, when you said something about the Garden of Eden and how they didn't just, if they would have had ran up to him instead of hiding, does anybody
Mhm.
recall anything about forgiveness being asked? Not until the cross, that I can recount. Um, just personally, just everybody having issues, myself included, just in this book and every other book, and the purpose of life being God realization. I found that the main thing that stands in the way of those things is lack of forgiveness for yourself. And in speaking of some scars, being as though that seems to be the split in which we got separated from God, that would be a huge impact in consciousness to follow life through the lineages of embodiment, that just the forgiveness part. Like, to not, I mean, just, the poor girl thinking it's fornication because she's afraid that it's not a holy matrimony being sealed by the eyes of the Lord. And again, the just all of it. This, I was just wondering if there was ever anything that anybody remembers forgiveness being the main thing that was ever spoken of in the Bible or in anything before the New Testament. Was that missing?
No, it wasn't missing. And I mean, the Old Testament, it was forgiveness, but it was through sacrifice. That you would go and make your offerings at the temple in order to, as your I guess payment, but as your offering of love to the Lord. That that's how things were paid for, as it were. That's how you would earn your because but this idea of forgiving yourself is the part that I really wanted to capture on there. It's God is bigger than forgiveness. I mean, God knows the nature of this world. God is God. I mean, he, she, that. It doesn't it That's good for scaffolding for growing, right? All of God's all of God's forgiveness. The problem isn't with God forgiving you or not, because God has an unconditioned love. How could that be, that he would hold something against you if he has an unconditioned love? Let's not say he's unconditional anymore, if that's the case. But he understands the nature of our mind, and he understands that he can forgive us all he wants. But for us to forgive ourselves, that's the difficulty. Holy Mother makes a beautiful quote. She said, uh, the grace of God is easily attained. He said, but the grace of one's own mind is difficult indeed. And so that's why faith is fundamental to everything. And that's why our practice is about sitting in the presence of this divine love, so that we can grow and learn to accept this grace, so that we can grow and learn to define ourselves by this grace and not by our shortcomings. So that we can walk confidently into the presence of the Lord and not feel that shame, not feel that remorse, not feel that insecurity, not because we're perfect, but because the grace makes us perfect. That grace gives us that sonship or daughtership of the divine, and that we're not beggars. And so, yes, in that sense, and in this young girl's quest, he didn't. There's no forgiveness necessary in it because nothing has happened yet. But nonetheless, his focus on prayer is as the solution is a beautiful thing. Well, take it to the divine. Take it to the divine. And see what happens. See what happens.
Yeah, that was more how they view how quick we are to consider ourselves unworthy of anything all the
Yes.
time. And once you would reach that point, if there's a point to reach, it's basically just moving the muck out the way, and you see it's already there, But that's why I love the Vedanta, because it preaches the divinity within, not the need for anything. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the need exists of its own. When we talk about the need, it's because it exists within us, and within the Christian structure, within the Christian path, it's Jesus that gives that full permission. For you, it's through that sacrifice that all of that forgiveness is given in a physical way. God showing, I will make my greatest sacrifice for you. It's not just me asking for your sacrifices all the time for forgiveness. He says, look, I am showing you, I will do anything to reach you, to touch you, to be a part of you. The forgiveness is on our side. We need the forgiveness for ourselves. We need the forgiveness so that we can open our heart and not hide like Adam and Eve did, And you can kind of see this trail all the way through Christian theology, because when Christian theology talks about our nature, they always talk about our nature after the fall of Adam.
Yeah.
I'm a sinner.
Yeah.
But Adam wasn't born at the fall. Adam, Adam didn't start existing after he made his mistake. Adam started before that. So the nature of Adam wasn't the fall. The nature of Adam was perfect, was perfection. That divine relationship with the beloved in oneness in paradise, both Adam and Eve. And so all of Christian theology kind of measures from the fall of Adam onward, rather than talking about our nature being perfect and the sin causing a delusion in ourselves as being imperfect. That in our true nature, we are free. And so that is one difference in the emphasis, and it's one that Ramakrishna spoke to. We just read on Tuesday night. He says, if one goes around saying, I'm a sinner, truly you will become a sinner. He says, one should always hold on to the fact, I am the beloved, I am ever free, ever pure, ever perfect. And it's not by our effort and not by
I wonder why they didn't say I'm sorry.
What's that? You wonder why what?
Yeah. Why not just say I'm sorry? I guess that was just the main thing. Why didn't they just say, Baba, I'm sorry? Forgiveness
Yeah,
came later. Why was that not in that nature to automatically say, out of that love, to fall so fast to say, I'm so sorry? Why the separation?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
stuck this long. Ow.
yeah. Well, probably the whole rest of the play wouldn't have happened.
There you go. You answered it.
you know, the whole rest of the play wouldn't have happened. So, but it is the truth of the matter. God's forgiveness is for us, not for him. It's not whether he forgives us or not. He's not up there like, maybe not, maybe we'll see. He has done everything possible, not just in the Christian tradition. Look in all the traditions, the sacrifice of these avatars, you know, Buddha leaving his wealth and his family and finding his freedom, and then just devoting the rest of his life to service, to love, to teaching, to blessing. Look at Krishna, and all of the avatars gave themselves to to us, really sacrificed for us, and lived lives of marvelous renunciation, marvelous detachment, full of light and love. And so every messenger of the beloved gives that message, that our unity with the beloved is paramount and it's available to us. We just have to choose it. We have to choose it. We have to become aware of it. We have to fill ourselves with it so that we can undo all the internal pain that blocks us from it. And all that internal pain comes from us not forgiving ourselves, which in other speak is us not accepting the grace of God. Feeling, oh no, I have to be worthy of grace. Well, if you're worthy of grace, it ain't grace. Yes, Kieran.
Isn't forgiveness like whether you forgive yourself or forgive someone else? It's to free yourself and to live in the present, because what is past now, and you move on from there, and you make yourself, you move on only if you forgive, and if you are the person that you forgive, then you do not repeat that again, that you learn from it. And if you're forgiving somebody, it has to be primarily, it'll free yourself, because you won't be caught up in that. The person who did something or said something probably doesn't even think about it, whereas we are continuously suffering to mull over it. So we free ourselves. And also, as I'm getting older, sometimes it's so much better to think that whatever someone said or did, how do we know that was their intent or they meant? It's all depends on our own perception.
Yes.
And then from that to learn is that they didn't insult you or say something to you or whatever, because you are not this person. So whom are they insulting or whom are they hurting? we in our mind start hurting ourselves.
Yes.
So it's and if you do that exercise over and over again, slowly, it does become automatic. You know what I'm saying? And last time when Bindu had asked about grace, you were explaining things. There was something you said that kind of stuck with me. Is you gave an example of someone, I'm not sure if the example is the same, but it meant that if somebody wanted to stop doing something and every day they said, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And they couldn't help it. But one day they stopped doing it, and that is grace. In other words, you know how we think I did it? It's not I. It is like everybody, I could never understand that grace is always present. So grace is within us. We are grace, like God is grace. I don't know how to say this without sounding weird. We are God in essence.
Yes.
If you believe in the oneness of Vedanta. And so we just don't allow to be in that space of grace. That's why we don't understand. And so ever since I've been, that was like such a beautiful thing for me to practice. So in anything that happens, you actually attribute it to the grace within. That the small I didn't do it. It's the self. And I hope that it just flowers into bigger things for me. But it just makes you move on with everything from a different perspective, more from the within than the outside. And so for me, that was just a aha moment of some kind when you said that. Because, for me, we look at grace as something huge and something, grace is there in every little thing, every little moment. And not like it has to be something so obvious and big. I don't know. So I was thrilled that day.
Yeah, no, grace is something to be thrilled about for sure. So there's two things you were talking about there. One,
and forgiveness also is kind of to free yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Well, forgiveness will begin to happen once we grow toward a knowledge of what we are and who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Once we stop identifying with the body and the mind, we won't care what people have to say about the body and the mind. We'll be able to let go of that quite easily. We get offended or we feel the hurt when somebody attacks something that we're attached to. So in one sense, if you're really offended by something, be grateful to that person because they just pointed out to you your greatest attachment. And you can then do the work to try and let go of that. That's one of those things. You mentioned it earlier that whenever I feel myself get annoyed by something, I would tell myself, who is there to annoy and who is there to be annoyed? And so that this internal forgiveness is important because we can't approach God. It's part of the karmic game, as it were. Unless we believe that we're forgiven or that we can let go, that we can safely let go of our faults. You see, because we believe in our fallen nature, we believe in our small self. And we feel like if we're given full permission to live any way that we want to live, that we're going to choose evil. And we believe this at a deep part in ourselves. We feel that we're not good people, and if we're given freedom, where nothing is held against us, that we're going to jump in and just, like Girish Ghosh said, if I'd known there was such a large hole to throw all of my sin in, I would have done a lot more. That's somebody who knows their attachment to that lower self. But the fact of the matter is that when we're seeing clearly, when we know who we are, and we're confronted with grace, we explode into growth and beauty because we are divine within. When we say that we are God, it's not just Vedanta. Christianity, believe it or not, also says it, but they say it really in a more accurate way. They say that you are the image of God. You're created in the image of God. And the importance of phrasing it that way is that that implies that that which you think you are is not God, but that which you are in essence is God. So you're like a mirror. You're like the image in a mirror of God. So in that sense, and the importance of putting it that way, of saying you are the image of God, is because the you think you are doesn't have any substantiality to it. It's going to disappear. It is part of the illusion that we're living in. And so that's not the part that is God. All the things. And so we don't have any substantiality in and of ourselves as a small self. This is what happens at enlightenment. We drop off that seed pod, our ego, we let it go. And we then manifest our true nature unlimited and unrestricted by our wrong sense of what we are and who we are. And grace is absolutely necessary for that, because you won't give yourself permission to be free. You won't. It's the nature of karma. It's the nature of the mind. The mind wants you to earn your way, and the ego wants to make sure that you earn your way. That's part of its charge, but it's impossible to earn our way. If we lived a perfect life, that was just our nature. We didn't add anything to ourselves. We didn't get a bonus for that. When we live against our nature, we simply become unaware of our nature. And in that is suffering. In that is pain. In that is karma. So we have to have this grace for our own forgiveness. And then once we come into touch with that grace, once we grow in our faith of that grace, there's a story, a parable that Jesus talks about this guy that, a whole bunch of people owed a rich man, some money. And so one by one, they came to the man and to pay their debts, and none of them had the money to pay their debts. And the rich man said, he one by one forgave them, their debt. Said, okay, no worries. I give you your debt back. It's no problem. So he's forgiven the debt of like 3 or 4 or 5, I don't know, a number of these people. And all of them go out and become gracious. They also go out and forgive the people that owed them, because now they were debt free. They weren't desperate for the money that was owed to them by all of these other people. And so they went on forgiving the debt of people, and on it went, all except for one man. One man went out and abused the people that owed him money in order to get more money, because now that he didn't have any debt, when they gave him money, he'd be richer. And so he went out and started persecuting the people who were in debt to him. And when the rich man heard this, he came down hard on that man, threw him into jail, took all of his possessions. And, the story is just very unpleasant at that point. And so that's really what will happen within us. When we grow in this grace, we become gracious. When we know of the forgiveness given to us, we become forgiving, because that's what we have always been. That's what our true nature is. It's a nature of forgiveness. It's a nature of grace. It's a nature of mercy and kindness and compassion. That's what we are. And if we truly accept the forgiveness, if we truly return to our inner nature, because we're free to now, if we do that, we will find our bliss. But if we take advantage of it and go outward, even more so into the senses, then we suffer even more, like that. So they're two sides of the same coin. We grow in our forgiveness of others as we grow in our understanding of the grace of the divine, of the beloved. And it becomes, yes.
Just one little thing. Also, when we catch ourselves getting annoyed or hurt or thinking whatever said or done is not right, actually, if we step back just for a second and think and examine ourselves, that whatever was offensive, are we doing the same to someone else? Because that's the time then to forget what the other person is doing, because we are not responsible for the other person's actions, but quickly try to see, am I like that sometimes? And that's the time to say, oh my goodness, I should never do that. Because look how offensive it is when this other person is doing it. So
yeah,
that's the time for yourself to examine yourself and And then forgiveness is automatic.
Right.
Well,
Well,
it's gone.
It's of our nature,
But
yeah.
it's a good exercise for self-improvement at the outer level, or whatever you may say it.
But it's a good ego killer.
Yeah,
know,
because
and-
most of the time we are quickly offended by other people's behavior, but we could be worse than that.
Holy Mother
Or
says that.
same.
That's Holy Mother's teaching to us. She says, if it didn't exist within you, you would not be able to see it in others.
Mhm.
And she brings that idea of the baby and the thief. A baby sees no thief. You can go into the baby's room and take all of his diapers. He's not going to care at all. He
Yeah,
doesn't have
and that thought about if it isn't within you is kind of a slap. You realize that the way you think is about others is the way you are actually.
Yeah.
And that's a horrifying
No,
exposure
I
of
had a
yourself.
class. I had a class one time where we did that as an exercise, kind of
It's
as a trick,
horrible.
really. At the beginning of the class, I told everybody, think of the person in your office you like the least, and then write down all of their faults on a list. And then I said, what you just did was list your own faults.
Mhm.
That's how we become aware of it. And knowing that, it does help us become humble to let go of our ego, ourself.
And it's
Priya,
pretty shocking.
yeah. Oh, well, yes, I'm glad that it's shocking. It's not often very shocking to me.
No, I mean, in the sense that why would you think like that? Because that's the way you're possibly yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
Because not everybody takes a situation and feels the same way.
Right. That's right.
So it's a tool for yourself.
Yes, life is that for sure. Priya, you had something or a question?
Yes, I had a question about the other saying you had. It was about the kind of like making the job around God, I guess, like your prayers and that type of stuff. But I guess my question is when you have a householder's life, also to do how I'm trying to use my words. How practical is that, I guess? Or you know how we used to say like put your job and use it as if you're doing it for God. Um, I don't know if I can, how logical is it to kind of like making or finding a job nowadays, I guess, in order to fit your life, I guess, towards God in that sense to live that as if you're trying to do your prayers every 3 times a day and saying, okay, no, I can't pick this job because it doesn't fit around that, I guess technically. Or are you trying to say stick to like picking a job but yeah, doing your prayers, or actually doing it towards God and still making it about God? Is that what you're trying to mean? I'm trying to figure out what you were trying to say, I guess.
Well, there are different ways of doing it. If you have a job that you don't feel like pulls you out of your awareness of God, then that's a great job. Stick with that. If you find it pulling your awareness away, and there are ways that you can mitigate that by changing your perspective or by changing your view of your job, like if you're doing nursing and you can get in there and get all harried about all the needs of all the patients and get totally caught up in your day and not think of God at all. Or you could understand that you're serving the Divine Mother, that it's the Divine Mother in each of those patients' beds, and you go in thinking that way and setting your mind that way, and then serving them in that way. The same situation can have a radically different effect on your psyche, on yourself. So if you're able, to the extent that you're able to do that, do that. That, of course, is the best and first way. If you simply can't do that, and an option either comes up for something that would be less stressful or something that might be more helpful to you, then take that. If nothing comes up and you're in this situation and you're struggling and there's not something else offered to you, then do what the pilgrim just told this young woman to do. Take it to the mother. Say, Mother, please be gracious. Give me something that is advantageous to my spiritual life, or teach me how this is advantageous to my spiritual life. But you keep your main focus inside on God, and make the outside match that. really work on that, you know, as long as you, as long as we have this idea of being the doer, karma demands that we be responsible for that and take it forward. And so you do what you can. Your most important thing in life is your realization. That doesn't matter whether you're a monk or a householder. That's the fact of life. The most important thing is God realization. You won't be happy. You won't be content in life until that's the case. And so we make our life, we live our life accordingly. And we do whatever we can for that to happen. There's multiple tools for doing that. But certainly, if you lose your job and you're looking for a new job, you know, take it to the mother immediately. Say, Mother, I don't want a job that's going to take me farther from you. Please lead me to the job that will bring me closer to you, or to the circumstance that will lead me closer to you. And have faith in that and go forward. You know, prayer really is at the center of these things, for these life-changing situations anyway, for these events that are sort of outside of our seeming control. So we take it to prayer, we take it to the mother in it. But you know, I wasn't focusing so much on the big things like that. I was just thinking, each day that you live, are you living it where you can say, the most important thing to me today was God realization? You know, and if not, then it's up to you to how you're going to remedy that. You know, whether it's just going to be a change in disposition and a practice in seeing everyone as God and serving accordingly, or whether it means you need to start looking for a new job. It's up to you. There's not a solution outside of yourself for that. You decide. But we should live in a way, and you know, this is really hard for me to say, because you know, I'm a hypocrite in this, because you know, I don't know what people say about my life, but I have some days where I'm more you know, full of the divine than other days. And I don't know, I'm putting myself in a weird situation, because I mean, there is a certain extent where I'm like, come on. Of course, I looked at my day and like, yes, God realization was my most important focus today. And I feel like to a large degree it was, but I didn't realize God today. And so there's still more, you know, to be done, whether it's in my understanding of grace, or my acceptance of the presence, or my deepening of my relationship. I don't know, but I didn't realize God today. And so there's work to be done. There's prayers to be prayed. There's efforts to put forward tomorrow. And so we don't, you know, we practice the acceptance of forgiveness in God's grace by not being remorseful, by not beating ourselves up and identifying with fault. That's just another attachment. It's not helpful. Guilt and shame is just another attachment. We lay those on grace so that we can let go of them. Those are the bondages, you know, that hold us down. And so we just, like Brother Lawrence is the perfect example of really what we're talking about here. You know, he just continuously tried to keep his mind on God. And he says very clearly in there, when my mind would wander away, I would just bring it back and go forward. I wouldn't make a big deal of it. I wouldn't show any remorse. I wouldn't go through big apologies and whatnot. I assumed grace, put my mind back on God, and went forward. He says, if I was doing something I shouldn't be doing, I stopped doing it. If I wasn't doing something that I should be doing, I did it immediately. And that was the remedy. That was it. Moment by moment, he stayed in the awareness of God. It's like, again, the Peace Pilgrim. You know, she says, I lived as God's butler. Every moment to me was an opportunity to serve. And I would look around always with an eye of service. How can I serve? How can I care? And so we want to do that the best we can. And we fashion our lives accordingly. We don't use our life as an excuse for why it's okay for us not to have realized God today. That's the important thing. If you feel like you're doing your best, beautiful. Keep going. Keep going. Absolutely. If you find something you can improve on, absolutely improve on it. Keep going. Keep going. We'll all get there, but it's a matter of time. Why suffer longer than you need to? Why be hungry longer than you have to? So all in that. Now, so he's, oh, it's 8:06. We can't go on. Oh, well, we could, but I'm putting a mark here though, so next week I don't have to wonder why I can't remember anything.
The
But,
wolf was right before we started too. It was like 3 pages prior. The
page.
wolf
Oh,
and the rosary.
wow, and Vedanta 3 pages could be 7 years.
I know, I know. It is. It's so funny because God is like truth and love and acceptance and grace all wrapped in a bundle. And you're looking at all these little squares. Every single one of you is a part of me. Every single personality is something I've had to embrace in life and overcome at some point in these 40 years. And just thinking about it, like people, like I've accepted, like y'all feel like family. Like this is one huge body in front of me. I'm looking at God right here. Like the love pouring out of this screen is God. It's right there. And like I just think about it, like in life, who I rejected. It was me I was rejecting. And then that's what you don't pay attention to. You're rejecting God because you're rejecting yourself and others. That's a mirror. So at this point, there's nothing but God here. And it's hard to not see any, just that's grace.
That is
It's
grace.
beautiful. There's the beloved in this room.
Yeah, it's good. It's grace and it's the reality,
Yeah.
You are seeing the beloved. And it's not just, it's not just Zoom.
No, it's everywhere. Yep. So I
God is
meant
everywhere. Yeah.
everywhere. Everywhere.
No, it's true. And that's our practice. I always talk about Swami Arapasananda when his mother was in the hospital and thought that she was going to die. And I saw him always talking to himself. And I jokingly went up to him at one point. I was like, Maharaj, why are you talking to yourself all day long? He says, I'm just repeating to myself, God is everywhere present and always perfect. He says, my mom's dying in the hospital and I really have to struggle to see the perfection. So I'm just constantly reminding myself all day long, God is everywhere present and always perfect. So this is the way we do that. He knew that it was a situation that was bigger than where he was at. And so he relied on the truth and really held on to it by repeating it all day long and carrying on his duties. So that's what we do. If we see a thing that we can easily do or change to keep our mind at the feet of the beloved, by all means, do it. It won't be but a few seconds before you feel great joy in having made the right decision. Mother will make sure of that. She always lets you know with a sense of inner peace when you're moving in the right direction. Because Mother wants nothing more than for you to forgive yourself, to transcend your faults and your lower nature, and to begin to live your life in the awareness that you are that, living and playing in this world. So yes, do what you can, as long as you know or believe yourself to be responsible for it, and move on. And when that changes, you change as well. All right. Very good. Jai Ma, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji.
Jai Ma. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you,
homework.
Swami.
Great, your homework.
Thank
I have
you
to give
so
you your homework assignment. Realize God.
Mm.